Hey, happy Thursday, everybody.
Ooh.
It's Get Your Paint On. We're running a little late today. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties in the beginning, but here we are, and we have a very special guest today with us. This is Ron Cruzy. Say hi, Ron.
Hey.
Everybody can see you there. And also hanging out with us are the lore masters, Josh Cologne and Doug Seacat.
Hello.
Hi, I am a lesser lore. I'm like a lesser war beast. I'm a lesser lore.
I don't think that's true at all.
You remember a lot of things.
All right, so Ron, what are you painting up today?
Right here, Shadow Sun Industries.
Ooh.
Nice.
Ah.
And so it's looking like you got, what kind of base coat are you starting with?
Oh, I airbrushed on some pig iron and a little bit of ghosted on some silvers above it, kind of laying down that base coat. Because today I want to show people highlighting and shading metallics on broad open surfaces.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You're going to add some glows to that as well?
Yeah, if time allows, I'll
Okay.
add some glows to it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's see it. What color are you going to start with?
Okay, so I started off by making a little mix of inks. I mixed turquoise ink and the brown ink together, which creates a colorful black, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
here comes the turquoise.
Yeah, there you go.
And you're applying that over your base airbrush?
Yeah, I hope so.
Nice. Let's hope. Fingers crossed.
And the brown ink. Psst.
Look at that. That's so pretty.
That's pretty cool. Look at you guys.
All right, so we're just coming back from the break. This is fun. I haven't done this for a while.
It has been a while. It feels
Yeah.
alien almost. I'm not going to lie.
I was out for a few weeks. How was your holiday, Josh?
It was pretty good. You know, went home and visited some family. You know, felt like a person again for a while. You know, that's pretty good. And I know you had a good time. What about you, Doug? You had a good holiday?
Yeah, I had a long stretch of doing nothing, which I always like.
Oh, man, that's always the best. But now we're back. Now we're back getting our paint on with the studio director, the sculpting director, the master, Ron Cruzy. Look at him.
That's actually, so there's probably a lot of people out there who don't know Ron. So, Ron, for the people who don't know who you are, can you
Yeah.
give us a little bit of your privateer pedigree? You've been around for a long time.
Yeah, I've kind of disappeared in the shadows for a while.
Much like
But,
ninjas do.
Yeah, I was actually asking the other day some people like how long I've been here for. 15 years.
Oh,
15.
my God.
15 years, yeah.
And you started out as a studio painter, right?
Well, I started off as a freelancer. I lived in the area, and I was actually working in the studio for a couple years as like an in-house freelancer. Yeah.
Wow.
Before I was on the salary, all right. But which made it nice because I would just sometimes get up and be like, I'm done. I'm out of here. See you guys. And I'd just be gone for 5 days because I'd be out backpacking or something, living the life, right? But yeah, then I came in as the studio painter for a couple of years.
I remember back in my earliest days in-house, after I was finally allowed to be in the building, seeing Cruzy come in, and we would have like the no quarter pages up on the wall, and Cruzy would come in, get to see his work up there on the wall, and make comments and corrections and so on. That was my first interactions with Cruzy.
Yeah.
15 years. That means like the old school Mark One, like escalation days, like ancient days. Like
Yeah. Because like the first models I painted were the first RPG figures, and I was painting all the original Horde stuff before I had released to the public.
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I've been in. That's some old times, long ago.
And then they trapped you forever.
Yeah,
And now you're like
'cause-
a spirit in the
yeah.
walls.
It was funny because we were in a different building at that time, and the building was so old and dilapidated that every time it rained, like the roof would be leaking in the studio, and we had all these cups set up everywhere to catch the drips of water.
Oh, the glory days.
I never
Yeah.
I never saw that first original
Yeah,
really bad building.
it was glorious.
God, man, how far privateers come. Like, and you've been here to see it all. You and Doug. That's amazing.
So one of the things I'm doing with, you know what? I got to add on to this ink mix I made. I actually added a little bit of umber.
What did you forget?
Well, add a little bit of paint to the ink mix just to give the ink, what I call a slurry, a little bit of body to actually grip to the metallic paint. So I added a little umber and coal black to the mix. It makes it a little sticky, right? Because if you just do straight ink over metals, then it kind of tends to beat up on the metals, like it's kind of hydrophobic,
Interesting.
right?
I like that word.
Hydrophobic.
Yeah, it's like when your house plant's soil gets too dry, it becomes hydrophobic.
It's like watching
That's
a
where I learned that
scientist
word.
paint. God. And so we're doing Monpok. We're doing Shadow Sun. So Doug, can you tell us a little bit about Shadow Sun Industries and some of the background behind this amazing faction?
Well, yeah, these guys are actually pretty cool because they're basically corporate ninjas, you know. So you get a combination of your corporate intrigue and scientific shenanigans together with your clans that go back to several centuries to I think the beginning of the Tokugawa shogunate. And so we have these clans that have their deep roots in Japanese criminal and political circles that have then created this nice company that enables them to make supersized ninjas.
Oh man, it's like it's kind of like if the Yakuza ran Microsoft, but then but the bio experiments.
Yeah. I like the notion of it being sort of like, it's sort of the Japanese equivalent of the company in RoboCop.
Oh, right.
Where, you've got this sort of slightly dubious company that's making really powerful weapons and probably selling them to the government or keeping them themselves. We have this idea that, like, you get the sense with Shadow Sun that they've kept a lot of the good stuff for themselves.
Right.
They've made money on a few things, but for the most part, all the really good stuff they've kept internally to power up their ninjas. And they have like these. They've mastered, the equivalent of like stealth technology with these carbon nanotube suits on their shinobi. So they can basically be invisible, and it always makes me wonder with these buildings if they're playing some kind of like light manipulation,
Right.
like maybe these buildings are a little more than they seem, and these you can imagine these buildings scattered around the cities where Shadow Sun has an influence, and this is where they can kind of refill the nanite supplies and weird. Biotech components of their shinobi, take them in for servicing because when you're supersizing as a ninja a bunch of times, like
Right.
it starts to wear you out.
They also keep their like strike fighters and all that stuff, all those in there as well.
Is it possible that technology could work on the buildings as well? Could they make them grow and be destructive forces, or could they shrink them down and put them on the back of a truck?
There's a good possibility that even the building that Ron's building, like there's an invisible parts of it that you can't see, like on the model.
Well, I think a lot of their sort of growth and shrinking tech requires biology. And so that would be dangerous. We don't have sort of semi-organic buildings yet, but I do think there's probably some kind of the equivalent of, digital printing going into the construction of these buildings. Like we know they have this nanite technology, so I would expect that these buildings could grow up really fast. Like you don't even see a workforce out there. They just have like the blocked off section where this building was going to be, and then like a couple of days later, there's like some fog, and then suddenly there's a building there.
That's terrifying. Oh, hi, Lyle. Thanks. I miss you too. We got a lot of people in the chat today.
How dare you,
Pagani,
Lyle?
Hungerford, Lyle. Hi, everybody.
I read that, Lyle. Like, how dare you? You miss me.
Lyle is writing in from jolly England.
Lyle.
Look at Ron still putting in that ink.
Ron's like super focused.
Yeah.
Look at him. Look at that intense gaze.
He has the best focused look.
So one thing nice about adding a little bit of paint in with your ink slurry for metallics is as you layer on the shadow, the inks they kind of color the metallics, so you start getting colored metallics, but the paint starts to build opacity in the shadows and it starts to dull the metal down. And so you get like that double contrast of color and also shine changing, which is really good, especially when you're doing armor and swords. But it works really well on these structures.
It's just amazing to see how technically so little. I mean, it seems easy because Ron's doing it, but like how so little makes such a big impact, even in these early stages.
You know, just see the forms of that
Yeah.
building plate starting to come out.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I'm seeing this part of the model. The camera's seeing over here. So I'm not going to mess with that.
God, that's fantastic.
That's what we got going on in chat. Oh, Chris Walton's in the chat. Says he could listen to Ron say slurry all day long.
Yeah.
And knowing Chris doesn't surprise me one bit. Does not surprise me,
Slurry's a great word.
It is.
especially from the beautiful voice of Ron.
Hungerford says he misses me, even though he's standing right outside the door.
That's creepy.
It is creepy. But
Literally
that's totally appropriate.
Staring in like
Yeah.
a ghost.
As we feel a shadow looming behind us.
So, like, how widespread do you think in the setting Shadow Sun is, Doug? Like, do you think they're like in every major city by this point? Like, is it like?
I don't know if every city, but I what I imagine is like what I like to imagine is they could have agents, you know, in any city. They're buying up mall space.
Oh my god! I want to
Mall
do
space.
an alt to this, which is like attached to a mall, like
Sure.
a Shadow Sun Industries, but like in your local food court.
Yeah, like you could have like your Shadow Sun building, and then there's like a T-Mobile attached, you know, on the side of it.
Stop raising my rent.
But I do wonder about that building. Like you notice they don't have like the traditional sort of helipad thing on the top. But I just wonder if like maybe the top opens up, and,
Like
something
Airwolf?
flies in. Yeah, yeah, a little Airwolf in. Oh, Airwolf.
yeah.
Such,
whole thing is hollow, so it just goes
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, nobody can hear me talk right here.
yeah. Tony and I are sharing a mic, so we're trying to make that work. Rune Wise says, why did marketing let them keep Shadow and Syndicate in the same name? Shouldn't they obfuscate their business output by rebranding as Happy Peace Tech or Good Guy Heroes or Mom's Robots? I think they probably have a few subsidiary companies, you know, to distribute some of their goods.
But they I mean, we already have that in the setting, right? Uber Corp
Sure.
is the other side to that, right? They're the friendly neighborhood for all your monster fighting
Nobody
needs.
trusts Uber Corp.
Yeah.
You don't want to. I mean, Uber Corp's pretty good in your stock portfolio.
Right.
You don't want to buy like children's toys from Uber Corp.
When your logo literally looks like a happy face, you know what I mean? You don't want to trust like Uber Corp. For all your monster fighting needs, Uber Corp, like you don't want it.
So I am diluting down blue ink, and I'm doing a real thin glaze on the highlighted metal areas. I like to refer to these as filters.
And what is that? What is that doing for you?
So it's very ever so slightly changing the color of the metals, and it's really difficult to see. All right, so talk about this for a second. One of the things I learned from seeing how like model makers, like the guys that do like the airplanes and tanks and cars and stuff, and how they do things is, in order to make things look real, they will do filters, and they'll put in little bits of color into the model that it's actually difficult for the human eye to pick up, but the information is being picked up by the eye and the brain, and the brain is more stimulated by what it's looking at, and so it seems more interesting and more realistic, but really consciously you can't tell what you're looking at, and it's called filters. And so a long time ago I painted some boring gray buildings, and I looked at them and I was like, I look like typical cartoon paint jobs that I normally do. But then I added all these little like oil paint dots of like green and yellow and red and blue all over the building, and I just blended it in with the thinner. And all of a sudden the buildings looked realistic. They looked like the actual scale model buildings. and I was really impressed with it, and it was just called filters. And so now I'm starting to do this more and more with my models, especially the bigger models, where I'll be painting a model, then I'll just add a bunch of little filters to it, and it makes it look realistic. Now you can do things where you can get your filters and you can push them certain color directions where they become more dominant if you actually need to change the color of your paint job. So in this case, I'm adding a little bit of blue, straight blue, as a filter, because it's going to give a little bit of feel that that the metal of the building is actually a real fine blue metallic. So there you go.
And that doesn't relate to shadow or highlights. Those are just like in the base. You're still kind of doing like the base layers, correct?
Yeah, it's like you lay down a base coat and you might do your shadows and highlights, then you'll add some filters.
Right.
Are you planning to do any kind of weathering effects or or is this sort of a shiny new building?
I'm going to keep it shiny.
Yeah, it's fresh grown.
That's right. They wash their buildings.
They probably have some pretty good surfacing techniques.
Yeah. They've done some biomimicry where like dirt doesn't even attach to the building.
Hitakul is asking, is there a method for choosing filters for various other colors?
I think that's the art behind it, and I'm still learning that. And I think there is some information there, and it's a quest that I'm on. So what I'm discovering now is I recently did some green vehicles, right? And when I highlighted the green up, it went pale. So I did a filter of like a green filter over it to bring back the richness and the opacity of the green. Not the opacity. What's another word for richness?
Like pigment, like trying to get more of
Like
the
saturation.
Saturation.
Right,
Yeah, I brought back the saturation and made it green again and made it vibrant. That's what inks do. The filters do the same thing, because sometimes when you highlight a model, it gets kind of paled out. Well, doing the ink or the filters over the paled highlight, it actually brings back the color, right? Well, it looked nice and green, but it looked kind of flat still. So I started doing blue filters in the shadows, and I started doing a little bit of yellow filters on top of the green. Then the vehicles got too yellow, so I added a little bit of Payne's blue with the yellow, and I brought it back to green. Then I found out that white was a good one to put on green, because it actually looks like weathering over the green. Okay, so next time you're outside, look at something in nature, and you'll notice that on a lighter surface, all the weathering is dark.
Right.
But on a dark surface, all the weathering is light.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it flips opposite, right? Once you see that, you'd be like, oh. I know that's weathering. That's not filters. So what I'm discovering is I'm finding that I'm liking filters, certain filter colors over certain base coat colors, but I tend to just work with white, blue-green, yellow, and then several browns. And I haven't really deviated from that too much. I'm still in that kind of copycat phase where I'm just copying what other people are doing in the process of learning.
Is that? I mean, are those colors chosen because those are the ones that, like, you observe the most in those environments?
I'm choosing those colors because painters that are better than me are choosing those colors.
Yeah.
And I'm just copying them until I can understand why they're choosing those colors. Because once I figure it out, then I can start modifying it. Right?
Richard Bennett is asking about the putting fully painted brushes in the mouth, and this is a common technique among all privateer painters, as far as I've seen. I'm sure they've exposed themselves to various, dangerous chemicals and so on. But that's just a part of the life. It's part of the risks.
Oh, I mean, just
This is like one of the first times that we've had the painter on camera, so it's like maybe the second or third time that anybody's even been able to see like the actual.
Oh yeah, because
brush
I'm
technique,
putting the
so-
second brush in my mouth
Yeah.
because I need the saliva to actually blend the paint. So
Saliva is the thing.
yeah.
If you don't want to put the brush in your mouth, you can always, as classy as it is, just spit into a little container. It is the consistency of the saliva that creates the magic. Having said that, all P3 paints are non-toxic.
yeah, and that's the thing, right? I wouldn't dare do this with some other brands of
Some
paint.
mercury paints.
Like paints that are traditionally made with traditional pigments. Do not put that in your mouth.
Do not.
Yeah.
Warning. So,
But-
so it's not just wetting though; it's the consistency of saliva.
Yeah, there's something in the saliva. There's actually a word for it
Because
that
it's a
actually
little thicker than water.
Like
little
the
there's an
viscosity or something?
elasticity to it
Interesting.
that grabs a paint and pulls it,
Because I always wonder, looking at the painters downstairs, I'm like, why don't you just
and it
dip
creates
in a
kind of
cup?
a nice natural.
the organic solution,
blend.
which Shadow Sun Syndicate approves of. Always go organic.
What would it be called? Shadow Sun packaged and sold saliva.
I think they already do, and we'll get to that in another wave, another release. Oh man.
Somebody asked about, or it's Legionnaires asked about, how does Shadow Sun relate to Uber Corp? And I can't get into that too much yet. I haven't delved into Uber Corp's background as yet very much, but I know they're almost the reverse. Like Uber Corp likes to roboticize everything.
Right.
They do not necessarily appreciate the organic. So if they were going to have a shinobi, they would rather have a robo shinobi.
Right, and I think in setting that they probably almost have to be competitors, right? To a certain
Yeah.
degree.
Well, yeah. I think they're working for different clients.
Right.
So, yeah, Uber Corp is a really. Shadow Sun is a pseudo criminal organization, but it is still defending the Earth, and I don't know exactly how what Oz's plans are with Uber Corp. I know that is something that might come back into the game at some point, right?
It's in the docket, I think. I think it's in the docket.
But I don't know exactly how they're going to work into the present scheme.
Right, and the agendas.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Because it seems to me like they were pretty bad originally.
Yeah, I think they were collaborators. I think that's right.
Yeah. They're definitely in sort of a hazy area where I don't think they're trying to destroy the world, but they're not doing a lot of good for it either.
They're in for the quarterly profits.
Yeah, far more so than Shadow Sun.
Right.
Robinobi, I like that.
Comment here from Sinistar that we should flavor our paints. I'm writing that one down.
That's a good marketing technique.
Sure. I guess you don't want people actively consuming it, though, right?
But like sanguine base
What-
and then an asterisk like cherry.
When I was reviewing some of the chemical analysis on the paint and stuff when we were getting them all approved, because it has to match European standards. So in some cases, the paint's actually safer to eat than food.
Nice.
Really?
I like
Yeah.
that. That's great. Just
Because
add a little- add a
the
little
European
protein there.
because the European standards are a lot higher.
That's
So they're just like, yeah, this,
I still feel compelled to say, don't eat our paint.
yeah,
It is not food.
Unless you want superpowers, maybe.
yeah.
So you're still applying that coat, Ron? You're still applying the.
I'm having fun. I'm like putting little thin coats of silver on the windows, and it's mesmerizing. And also the reality of I want to grab the model off the stand and just start spinning it around,
Yeah,
so I
that's
can get to
the-
the other areas, right? Because you kind of want to move the model at certain angles to get to certain areas better. That's all right.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, feel free to spin it around, and if you need to get at it, just kind of hold it, and we can throw it up on your screen so you
Sure.
can make sure that everybody can see what you're doing.
Yeah. So you see what I'm doing here is I'm actually running the side of the brush along the side of the piece just to get that high edge. We refer to this as edging.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good way to get like the sharp line on things. That kind of was a little sloppy there. That's all right.
And the entire time you're keeping mindful of like a light source, right? Like where the light's coming from and all that stuff. I know that's a very basic question, but
Yeah. That's something to be mindful of. I don't think that basic of a question, because there's different ways of approaching it. There's that approach where it's just like everything sunken in the model gets shaded and everything on the raised area gets highlighted. That's kind of a very classic way of doing it, but it doesn't work for everything. So one practice I've gotten more and more into is I'll spray the model black, then I'll spray it white from above,
oh wow,
and it creates like a natural zenith, like
that's
light to
zenithal
dark, right?
kind of thing.
Yeah, it kind of gives you a start, or if you're still learning where to put highlights and shadows, it's actually a really good way to kind of give you a jump start on how it actually should work. And nowadays, I'm doing it more and more with airbrush, and then I'm also learning that A lot of times you'll get a model that have like some sunken area in there, and you're going to have to artificially bring light sources into there, and you got to kind of bring them up. And there's also a thing where you kind of want to always hit like people's faces with a little bit of lightness. You kind of want to put an
Right.
extra spotlight on people's faces. And I'm doing that to the point now where I don't paint a miniature until I've done that to the model, where I've sprayed it black then white above. Even if I'm just going to cover it all up, I still like it because it helps me see it better.
And
Now, one of the things you can do is you can spray the model that black then white, then you can kind of do glazes over it,
Right.
and you can kind of start coloring it. And as the glazes,
polarizing it,
as the glazes kind of sit on top of it, then you can get more glazes and glaze the shadows and glaze the highlights, and it's a different way of painting. Because sometimes you paint and you paint and you paint for years, and you just got to change up the way you paint to keep it fresh and new. And there's a lot of different ways to achieve the same result.
you gotta try and keep yourself interested by trying different things.
Yeah.
Mixing it up a little bit.
Yeah. But you can see how like that dark metal was just a base coated, and I just made that ink slurry,
Right.
shaded it in, then I just hit it with the highlight edge, and it's like, that's dark metal, right? Where over here I had pretty much the same base coat. I just kind of overtook the windows again with a little more silver, and so it kind of looks like two different colors, but the base coat was the same.
Right.
You know, so that's another thing you can do with like ink slurries and stuff, is you can start changing. You can paint, like if this thing was nothing but leather browns, you could just paint it the same leather brown, and then you can use the inks to start shifting the colors in opposite directions. So it actually speeds up the process, because then your base coat's one color, but then your glazes are other colors. You get in the habit of doing that, you can save a lot of time.
So I'm like having a hard time keeping up with the knowledge bombs on this one.
Because for me, nowadays, it's all about speed.
Really.
Yeah, because now it's like if I can't get a model painted to completion in like 45 minutes, I start to feel weird.
So you're not right now where you're at. You're not really worried about us achieving a certain look or anything. You just want to be efficient.
Yeah, it's all about efficiency.
Wow.
So we got there's a few questions coming in about painting, and so first of all, the first question is just the size of the building. So how tall is the Shadow Sun Syndicate building compared to other mom and pop buildings? It's pretty,
comparable.
Yeah, it's pretty comparable
It's
size.
comparable,
I think
yeah.
the skyscraper might be a little taller.
A little taller.
Yeah, we purposely didn't make it too big. I'd say it's in the medium range.
It's unassuming, right?
Yeah.
The Shadow Sun, they wanna blend in, even though it's high, fancy, and there's this.
Well, and also there's fewer residences there.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
more office space. You don't want to live there.
All the human vats are in the bottom, are underground.
Yeah.
Not a giant arcology.
I do think there's probably some extensive basement structures.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Is like not everything can be like the next biggest thing too, right?
Well, you
it's
want
like-
you want some variety in your buildings on the table.
I have to purposely be like, no, we're making that one average, or we're making it smaller.
Right.
Because if you don't do that, then guess what? Everything that you produce is a little bigger than the last thing,
Scale creep is real.
and then 5 years later, like, yeah, you're out of control.
Well, and just in terms of sort of faction flavor, I like it too because it has a little bit more of sort of a delicate, it has a certain flavor to it that fits with how
Right.
even the Shadow Sun monsters are, are not
Sleeker.
bulky, heavy.
Note that was 3 coats of thin paint.
So Legionnaires asks, and I guess it's an airbrush question. So Legionnaires, you might need to clarify. But if you don't have an airbrush, how do you avoid streaks on bigger models?
Thin your paint down, and do 2-3 coats of thin paint. Sometimes more with certain colors, rather than trying to do less coats with thicker paint. That's how you have to do it. I would also try this out too. Try to get away with the biggest brush you can when you're laying down the base coats, and be real fast and sloppy, and try to base coat your model that first try to do it in like a minute, 30 seconds. And so a lot of times I'll get an old trashy brush, and what I call paint smashing, and I'll sit there and I'll just smash the paint the thin paint and the cracks and all is smeared around. And then when you're done doing that, you kind of get the brush and you kind of lap up all the pooling action, hair dry it, and do that 3 or 4 times. And that usually does the trick for me. Because you don't need an airbrush. Airbrush is nice,
Right.
but you don't need it.
I mean, we don't have to worry about it. We have really good airbrushes here in the building. So, like, I mean, we're but if you're not as lucky to have airbrushes like we do, following Ron's advice is the way to go.
Yeah, don't let it slow you down.
In terms of the lighting that you were talking about earlier, do you do anything different when you're approaching a building like this than when you're doing something that's more like a person?
Not really.
Similar
Not really.
techniques.
I approach it the same way. Now, I have noticed that sometimes people will change up their lightings to create a certain mood. Like I saw a painter the other day kind of do his lighting from almost the side because he was trying to create like this horrific, like monsters in the dark effect.
Right.
You know, so I've seen that.
Doug, how like at night in the cities, how brightly lit do you think the Shadow Sun Industries building is? Like, do you think it's pretty shiny? Do you think it's pretty ostentatious, or do you think that they keep it pretty subtle?
I'd call it tastefully glowing. But I can imagine, structures like the one that Ron's painting right now, that little dome area. Like I definitely imagine that having, kind of a glow that you could see from a distance, and I can imagine there being some other, glowing elements that you would see from a ways off, because branding's important. Even when you're Shadow Sun Syndicate, you need people to be thinking about the fact that you're there. This city,
Always there, always watching.
this city is not just protected by guard. There may be some shinobi nearby, lurking about on the rooftops.
I wonder what the relationship is between Guard and Shadow Sun. I bet it's pretty.
I think it's tense.
Yeah.
Tense, but they do work together.
So on this little bead here, I just used Meridius Blue and Arcane Blue. I think if I had some white or cream laying around, I would mix it in with the Arcane Blue, and I'd kind of lighten it up here. Could someone grab me some white out of this box right here?
Always liked
Thank you.
Arcane Blue.
But I'm going to shadow this orb with a mix of blue and turquoise ink thinned with water, so I'm making a glaze here. So this is a glaze rather than a filter. The glaze is just going to be a lot stronger. It's going to tint it a lot quicker. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to straight up and do this glow properly. I'm going to highlight this up a lot brighter than I normally would do. Then I'm just going to glaze over the highlight, and you'll see another version of what we've been talking about today. That was a pretty nice blend, wasn't it? Yeah.
I was impressed.
Yeah, I was waiting for it to like dry up too fast because the room is hot. There's lights on and stuff, but no.
So when you're painting at home, Ron,
Yeah.
just for yourself, like what's your painting environment? Like what do you surround yourself with?
Well, I have a giant monitor in front of my face. Like in the background of my whole painting stations is a big monitor, so I usually have like YouTube videos or Netflix going on. I have that going on. Lamps, brushes. Like I have an entire room devoted to painting and my hobby. I started putting up a lot of like can lights, like in the corners along the perimeter of the room. So all the light in my room now is all bounce light, and I got really into like getting like particular like colors, like warmth or cool colors of LED lights. And so in my whole house, I'm starting to play with like the temperatures of colors in the house to create like a feeling or a mood or an environment.
I can just imagine your wife walking in and being like, "Why? Like, why is all the shadows blue in this room?" Like,
So
I'm working, honey.
Yeah, it's less that like the blue and red as they're more like cool or warm, depending on the environment. She loves it. You're such an artist, honey. Yeah.
We got Ed Burrell is in our chat saying
up,
hi
Ed?
to you.
Well, Ed. He also appreciated that blend, Ron.
See, that's been 2 glazes, a thinned blue and turquoise ink that I've gone over that. Right, I'm going over straight white. And now what's going to happen is that ink on top of the white is going to start looking really rich, powerful, and vibrant, and it's going to create the feeling that it's actually glowing.
It is pretty remarkable how quickly that happens.
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot, but once you add the right combination of stuff, it pops, man.
Yeah. And this is how we do it. Like, this is how the studio does their glows, whether it's, the Crix glow or the Protectorate glow.
So does it usually end with a white, like at the very hot center?
Yeah, pretty much.
Good to know.
Not like white over this, but you end with white, then you glaze it.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to do it, but if I were to like add filters to this, I might do like some other color and do it like just right in here. And it would be a filter and you'd barely notice it, but it would probably create some kind of like color contrast within the orb if I was choosing to be extra arty about it. But I always tend to paint a little cartoony, which means that like your color transitions and your color choices tend to be a little perfect, which what kind of creates the cartoon effect. But I think for Monster Apocalypse, it's kind of works that way.
Yeah, I think it works. Well, and one of the fun things I was just thinking about is we have, a couple of different groups, Shadow Sun here, and then in War Machine we've got the Retribution, where we have allegedly stealthy groups that like glowing things, and, but at least with the Shadow Sun, they've got that technology where they could just kind of turn on stealth mode. So, like when they're not being stealthy, why not look colorful? Why not have that blue glow?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to just start making this darker. Not that it needs it, but just to push points home. Just so the peoples can see what you can do with this.
Nice.
Also, Ron, I know you had something someplace you needed to be. It's now 11 o'clock, so we can stop now. But I know we also started a little late, so if you're comfortable staying.
Man, I don't know if I want to be in that room. They're going to be
Just stay here, Ron.
Stay here. Everybody's got to stay here so Ron has a reason to not be at his
Yeah.
meeting.
It's safe here, Ron.
Yeah, they're all going to be talking about serious things and schedules and stuff. I'd rather be painting. Right?
Yeah, I think that's a good plan. They can come for you if they need to.
That's the thing. I spend all day working and working with the sculptors and the production sometimes, for 8 hours. Then I get off of work and I go in my room and I start painting to relax. And my sweetie will be like, "You work all day?" And it's like, no, I'm not working now.
Yeah, you're like, this is fun.
Yeah, I mean, even when I was a studio painter, I'd paint all day. Then I'd just come home and keep on painting. I just had to change the subject that I was painting.
Right.
Right? Because if you paint, a type of figure all day, in the studio, and you come home and you continue painting that figure, you burn out.
And you do some historical minis.
Yeah,
and stuff like
so
that,
that's
right?
actually when I started doing things like, I'd paint fantasy figures, so to say, in the office, and I'd go home and I would just start painting like vehicles for
Sure.
buildings.
Tanks.
Yeah, just switching the scale up, an airplane or something, anything. Mammoths for a mammoth game or something fun like that, and kept it fresh. The techniques, they all kind of cross over anyways.
So, God, we've actually had a couple of questions about the filters.
Yeah.
And so the first one, I think somebody needed a clarification of a filter versus a wash.
Okay, so a wash tends to be thicker, stickier, and the color stronger. And with a wash, you usually will put it on the model and you almost goop it on, like you really put a lot of it on, and it flows into the cracks of the model and it stains and sets inside all the recesses and cracks of the model, and the color stays there, and it dries there. The wash is good. It's going to dry, very similar to what it looked like when it was still wet, right? And it just kind of creates like this science-based shadow. That's what a wash does. But a glaze is you're not really wanting or allowing the glaze to sit in the shadows or fall into the cracks to stay there and dry. It's like you're almost just like changing the color of the surface. Think about it this way. You know when your teacher back in school had that damp cloth and they cleaned the chalkboard, and how the cloth would go across the chalkboard, and then the wetness of the chalkboard, you could see it dry like 2 feet behind the cloth. Right? That's a glaze.
Cool.
Or a wash, you would just saturate the whole chalkboard, and the wash would settle like along the edges or on the little tray with the chalk on there, and it would stay there and it would dry. It would color that area. Where a glaze kind of does the whole thing. Maybe that worked.
You just transported me back to elementary school.
There you
and
go.
I realized that there are no more blackboards, no more chalkboards anymore.
Did I answer the question?
I think so.
Okay.
The filter too.
And the filter, all a filter would be a color so diluted that you wouldn't even know that the color's there. But your brain's picking it up. When I was first taught filters on miniatures, a French painter showed me he had like miniatures similar to this. It was a guy in a suit of armor, and he put blue, red, and yellow dots on all the plates in the opposite corners, and he blended them in there to the point where you couldn't see them. But he was explaining to me how like, oh, your brain's seeing it, and it makes the miniature look interesting. What it also does is there's so much information going in your head at that point that it actually can't pick up on the blends as well, so the blends look better.
Yeah,
Because
it's almost like it makes it look more real because
Yeah.
you're not thinking about the color that's
right? There's so much information going in that you're not focusing on the blend being like, oh, your blend's kind of choppy. It's like, oh, there's so much information. I really can't actually focus on the blend as well. You're camouflaging
there. It's interesting.
using hidden color, right? And I can only imagine like there were some Renaissance guys figuring that out, thinking they were awesome
And they probably were.
and making so much money off of it too. It's magic. But you can see how I'm kind of just going from a colored black to like a silver edge over here. Right. You can do the same thing with straight black paint. You could just run black paint along the edge of here, and you could just brush blend black paint in it. You can get pretty much the same results. There are some talented artists that just do that technique. But it's always wise to try it all out, see what works for you. Yeah, I'm actually feeling pretty satisfied. Because if I wanted to highlight this edge here, bring it over, I literally would have to flip the model over, right? Because as you notice, that I'll put the paint down here, and then when I'm two brush blending, I'm bringing the paint out, right?
Right.
And so if you have to do the other side, you have to flip the model over. So because it's literally if I were to do this side and two brush blend it out, I have to do it with my left hand.
Right.
And I know it wouldn't work because I'm not trained in it.
Yeah,
I'm not practiced.
People who watch this show frequently know that I've got you locked down on a little spindle there that makes it so that you can't move the miniature around as much as you like.
I think I'll put a little white dot up here. See if it actually.
I really wanted to add my own sound effect when you did that. Just get in there. Oh, boop.
All right, guys. I feel the calling in that meeting. I can feel the tension rising.
All right.
And they're needing me right now.
Well, Ron, thank you very much. We're glad to have you here this week.
It was a pleasure.
Appreciate you coming in. Everybody out there, we will see you again next week, 10 a.m. 10 a.m.
Thank you,
See, I
everybody.
said it. I'm looking at Josh right in the eyes. He's
hold
giving
you
me a
to it.
look. I'm like, 10 a.m.
I'll hold you to it.
So we'll be there, and we'll see you then. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.